A chef who has remained unnamed was cooking in a kitchen one day when something nightmarish happened. You see, he was cooking something in a deep fryer when he suddenly started twisting his head all demonically, and then threw his head into the deep fryer with no hesitation at all. His whole head was fried in oil and he then died. A video of this went viral and people thought he was possessed because why else would you turn your head like he did? And no sane person would just throw their head into a deep fryer. But the more believable reasoning for this incident was that he had some sort of mental illness, which was even noticed and pointed out by some of his coworkers. The video of it happening is very disturbing because one minute the chef is cooking food and doing his normal job, and then suddenly he starts twisting his neck awkwardly and then throws his head into the deep frying oil. It comes out of nowhere and it's like a jump scare. It's crazy how awful stuff like this happens and we will never know why. May this man rest in peace.
A video of a Jesus Christ statue moving. It was shown by TV Azteca, and a guy named Donatello, he recorded it from an annual Holy Week that they celebrate in Mexico, where they carry a Jesus statue into one of the churches. As he's recording the Jesus statue, you see the head of the statue move. And again, you can let me know if it's fake or if it's real. And it also brings up the whole conversation that we talked about way before. People think, oh, is it a miracle?
Y llegando a la iglesia bajaron al Cristo de su cruz.
Como toda la Semana Santa.
Exactamente, como cada Semana Santa se hace, pusieron su urna y pues yo me puse a grabarlo y se apuesta haciendo como me le acerco a tomar su rostro y y mueve su cabeza, levanta su cabecita.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
It like went like
It's
like you got comfortable or something. That's just crazy, bro. It's not like the other ones where it's right up and you could kind of debunk it by saying, oh, maybe it's gravity just pulling the hand down or maybe pulling the head down. But this statue adjusted its head.
What you're about to see is the last video ever taken of 31-year-old Paola Miranda before she mysteriously disappeared. Paola was reported missing on December 17, 2021 after visiting family in Orlando, Florida. The next day, she was spotted by hikers wading in the Wikiva River, and it was there that they captured that final video of her. She then disappeared and has never been seen again. 3 days later, Paola's car was found at the Wikiwa Springs State Park with her phone and keys still inside. Authorities have since searched by boat, plane, drones, cadaver dogs, and have even used an underwater camera system, but no trace of Paola has ever been found. According to FloridaStateParks.org, swimming in the Wikiva River is not permitted, and I'm assuming that's because there are likely alligators and other dangerous animals there. I'm wondering if that's why the hikers recorded Paola that day. Her family confirmed that she struggled with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, which could have confused her and caused her to become lost that day, but they don't know if that played a factor in her disappearance. At this point, her family just wants her story to continue being told because she could be anywhere, and according to them, they fear that she could have also possibly been trafficked. So they have reached out to the FBI to investigate. If you have any information regarding Paola's disappearance, please call the number on the screen.
In 2019, Brazilian gang leader Clavino da Silva, otherwise known as Shorty, attempted to escape prison dressed as his 19-year-old daughter. So apparently on the day that he tried to escape, Shorty's 19-year-old daughter had been visiting him, and he had had this disguise smuggled in. So he literally just tried to walk out of the prison looking like this. But when the guards suspected something was up with this random woman that was trying to leave the prison, they got out their phones, started recording, and told the person that they needed to strip. And this is what led to that disturbing looking video that I played you a clip from at the beginning of this TikTok. Obviously, it was revealed that this was not a 19-year-old girl. It was a 42-year-old gang leader who was supposed to be serving a 73-year-long sentence. But this wasn't the end of the story for Shorty. You see, just a few days after this escape attempt, Shorty was found dead in his prison cell. Authorities afterwards claimed that Shorty had taken his own life. But in my opinion, I believe this might have been some sort of gang retaliation for the embarrassment that he put them through. I don't know, it is a pretty eerie disguise when you look at it. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms like Apple Podcasts.
What if I told you a Harry Potter star was brutally murdered? The Harry Potter books and films have captivated audiences across the globe for decades. But did you know a fatal stabbing cast a dark cloud over the films? Robert Knox was born in 1989 and loved acting from an early age. He went to Beth's Grammar School in Bexley and had been acting since age 11. He started to get kind of small roles in TV shows like The Bill, which you'll remember if you're my age. He went on to appear in the 2004 film King Arthur. Now in 2007 he auditioned for a role in the Harry Potter films. If he got this role, it would obviously be amazing for his career. And sure enough, he got the part of Marcus Belby in The Half-Blood Prince. He was thrilled to not only get the role in this film as well, but also be cast as the role of Marcus in the following film, The Deathly Hallows 2. However, no one had any idea that he would not survive to film the second film. On the 17th of May 2008, it's reported that 18-year-old Rob and his friends got into an altercation with a guy named Carl Bishop outside of a bar. A week later, on the 24th of May, Rob was out with his younger brother Jamie. This was just 4 days after the commencement of filming of the Harry Potter film, so he was obviously on a high. The boys and some other friends that they were with were outside a bar in Sidcup in London. Just after midnight, something horrific unfolded. Carl confronted the group with what is reportedly 2 kitchen knives. This turned into a vicious brawl. Rob was desperately trying to save his younger brother Jamie when he was stabbed. Tragically, the stabbing was fatal. Carl was arrested and charged with murder and reportedly showed absolutely no remorse for the attack. He was found guilty and was given life in prison with a minimum of 20 years. An annual film festival was created in Rob's honour, named the Rob Knox Film Festival.
This is the most disturbing sporting accident ever. In 1991, the Labrathorn race was cancelled due to a horrible skiing accident. Gernot Rainstandler, a 20-year-old contestant, was going downhill at full speed when he suddenly lost control as he was approaching the finish line and then slammed head-on into safety nets at extremely high speeds. This then trapped one of his skis inside the net, which resulted in his leg almost being completely torn off. He then began spinning out of control with a trail of blood following him, staining the entire mountain. His body then stops at the bottom of the hill as a pool of blood forms around him and people come over to help. He also fractured his pelvis and was literally ripped in half. The impact caused serious internal injuries, fractures, and nerve damage. He was transported by a helicopter to a hospital where he received multiple blood transfusions. But despite receiving blood transfusions before and after the operations, he passed away from severe pelvic bleeding. This is just awful, and what makes it worse is that there's a video of the whole situation unfolding on the internet. Rest in peace to Gernot, and what a terrible, terrible accident.
April 16th of this year, 25-year-old Michaela Standridge posted this cryptic message on her Facebook page. 5 days later, she disappeared. Michaela was last seen running out of a house that she was staying at near Concrete, Washington on April 21st. After running out of the house, she called 911 and could be heard screaming for help, but shortly after the call went through, her phone disconnected. Michaela made her last phone call approximately 15 minutes later to a family member, but she vanished right after and hasn't been seen or heard from since. The Skagit County Sheriff's Office arrived to the area where the 911 call was made not long after, but didn't find anyone who needed help. During the investigation, authorities searched the property where she was staying at and interviewed the people living at the home, which was on Skagit View Drive, but this provided no leads. It wasn't until Search and Rescue expanded their search that they found Michaela's phone, which was located near the Skagit River. Authorities have since searched the river by boat, drones, and helicopter, but Michaela is still missing. According to a recent post from Michaela's aunt, she is believed to still be alive. Because of her last cryptic message on Facebook, it's not known if Michaela is being held against her will or if her disappearance has anything to do with human trafficking. But Michaela's family asks that if you see her, to take a picture of her and to try to stay with her until authorities arrive. Michaela is roughly 100 pounds with blue eyes, and she currently has blonde and pink hair. If you have any information about Michaela's disappearance, please contact the numbers on the screen.
They apparently vanished into a cabin in the woods, but then a farmer spotted something that blew the case wide open. It was summer 2021. Married couple Bart and Krista Halderson were a lovely pair by all accounts. They kept themselves to themselves in Windsor, Wisconsin. They had a gorgeous house together and 2 sons. Mitchell was 24 and again, much like his parents, kind of kept himself to himself. He had a good job and he was engaged. Then there was Chandler, who was a year younger, and he was actually at college studying IT. On the 2nd of July that year, strangely and most out of character, Krista never showed up at work. Now, her colleague Daniel knew her very well and just knew that this wasn't like Krista. He got really concerned. He tried to ring her, text her, but she just wasn't answering. He thought the only other logical step was to actually drive to her house and see what was going on. Once he got there, he saw her son Chandler, and Chandler actually told him not to worry. His mum and dad had actually gone to the family cabin due to an emergency with the plumbing, and they would be back after the weekend. Now, Daniel thought this was very strange because, again, Krista hadn't been kind of in contact to say she wasn't coming to work, but he was slightly relieved by this and he went home. He trusted what Chandler said. Why would he lie? However, the weekend came and went and Krista still didn't show up at work. So by the 7th of July, days and days had gone by with no contact from either of them as far as anybody knew. Daniel spoke again with Chandler and kind of said, look, you probably should actually ring the police right now. Chandler did what he was told, rang 911 and told them that his mum and dad had been picked up before the weekend by a couple he didn't know, and then he just didn't know what had happened to them. Chandler also decided to kind of make use of his time by going round door to door around all the neighbours and even waving on their Ring doorbell cameras saying, have you seen my parents? By this point, the oldest son, Mitchell, had also heard about his parents' disappearance, so he actually decided to drive to the family cabin himself and meet police there. It was actually a really long drive. It was like 3 hours from his home, but he just really wanted to see where his parents were. Police, as I said, met him there and they scoured the property, but it actually appeared that nobody had even been there at all that weekend. So what about the so-called plumbing emergency? Chandler's story didn't seem to be adding up, so police brought him in for questioning. During his questioning, a damning eyewitness report came in. A local farmer said that he'd actually seen Chandler walking from the woods a few days before he had reported his parents missing. Lo and behold, when officers searched the area that Chandler was seen in, they found human remains. Just days after this, they were identified as Bart. Chandler was arrested and the hunt was on to find his missing mother. Now, Chandler's girlfriend was actually really helpful and let police look through her phone and download all the information they could off the device. Something that they spotted on Snap Maps was really helpful in this case. It identified that Chandler had been near the Wisconsin River on the 3rd of July. Police ended up searching it and lo and behold, they found Krista's body. Chandler was now charged with his mother's murder too. He pleaded not guilty, but prosecutors would argue that he committed the horrific crimes because his parents found out he'd lied. He'd been creating fake email accounts to make it look to them like he was still attending college, which he wasn't. He was also captured on CCTV buying tarp, and blood was found in the basement of the family home. He was given life without parole for the double murder of his parents.
This might be the worst pedophile in American history. This is 58-year-old Scott Allison from Kentucky. In 2021, authorities identified Scott as being one of the worst pedophiles on the internet. This account that the authorities had been tracking was posting some of the most vile, disturbing CP and CSAM that they had ever seen, depicting the abuse of children as young as 2 years old. Scott had usernames on 2 different dark web pedophile websites, where he regularly made posts talking to other pedophiles and posted some of his collection. When authorities finally got Scott's IP address and tracked him down to his house, they made an absolutely grim discovery. When authorities raided his home, they found a hard drive. And on that hard drive, authorities located over 130,000 images and videos depicting CP or CSAM. Let's just think about that for a second. 130,000 individual images and videos. Just imagine how many kids were victimized to get a collection that big. They also, after doing a forensic search of his computer, found that Scott had saved 108,000 posts and pages related to CP or CSAM on the dark web in saved searches on his computer. Scott, as it turns out, was one of the dark web's biggest pedo peddlers, and he was advertising all across the dark web that he had one of the biggest collections of CP that people could get access to pay him for. Thankfully, though, Scott did plead guilty, but unfortunately, it's not life in prison. This is not life in prison. It should be, but it isn't. Scott's sentence is probably going to be a minimum of 15 years, up to 30 years in prison, a large fine. But once again, that means with good behavior like we've seen with these creeps so many times, this guy can put his time in and then eventually rejoin society. I think that with these people, you literally just lock them up, throw away the key, that's it. But obviously our government doesn't see these crimes the same way that we do. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife Courtney. It's available to listen to for free on all streaming platforms like Apple Podcasts.
Cucuy, the Latin American version of the boogeyman. I feel like a lot of us Mexicans and Latin people remember a lot growing up we were scared of. I know some places they say it differently. They say el cuco or el coco, but for the majority of it, the description of it remains the same. It's a hairy-like creature who has glowing red eyes and
has bat-like ears and razor-sharp teeth.
like a barracuda fish.
What the fuck?
Some other people say he's like a ghost figure or a shape-shifting creature, and it preys on misbehaving children and children that stay up late at night.
And he's known to hide under beds or in closets, just waiting for his opportunity to basically take you away and eat you.
And I know a lot of us, I know me personally, I was scared of whenever she would mention the name, and she never even told me how it looked. It's just the fact that, yo, her saying el cuco va a venir y te va a comer, that traumatized me, bro. And also, there's a show that told the story of el coco. It's called Lo que la gente cuenta.
Yo!
Used to watch it?
Yes.
So I'm gonna show you a clip of it. I was seeing in the comments, people were saying how like that specific episode it
was
traumatized
scary.
him. Yeah, it's a little boy, his mom, and a grandma. He tried to tell his mom, his grandma that he's seen the boogeyman,
they don't
but like
believe
they
him.
don't believe him.
No, I think I've seen this episode. I don't fucking remember what.
This man was killed by a dead snake. In 2014, Peng Fan, a chef in China, was preparing an exotic delicacy, a meal made from the deadly Indonesian spitting cobra, a snake whose venom could shut down a human body in minutes. Peng carefully decapitated the snake, removing its deadly fangs and venom glands. Believing his work was done, he set the snake's head aside, but the snake was not finished with him. Unknown to Peng, a snake's reflexes don't die immediately. Even severed, its head can still bite for up to an hour. Suddenly, as Peng reached for the head, the snake's head bit deep into his skin, releasing its venom. The venom, a powerful neurotoxin, began paralyzing Peng's body almost instantly. His breathing became labored, his muscles locked in agonizing pain. With no anti-venom on hand, the poison spread through his system quickly, and there was nothing anyone could do. And by the time help arrived, Peng Fan was gone, a man killed by a snake that was already dead. Even in death, nature's deadliest creatures can still strike.
You ever heard about what a aswang is? It's a Filipino legend.
Never.
An aswang is one of the most terrifying, well-known urban legends
In the Philippines?
In the Philippines, yeah. It's often described as a shape-shifting creature that could take the form of a human, an animal, or a hybrid of the two. They're said to be cannibalistic and bloodthirsty. And an aswang is also an umbrella term meaning a variety of shape-shifting creatures. But the one I'm going to be talking about and focusing on is called a manananggal. It's a self-segmenting vampire female monster with dangling intestines.
I heard about this before.
During the day, it appears as a normal, beautiful woman, literally just lives a normal life. And at night, her arms turn into bat-like wings. Her upper torso separates from her lower body, and she has a long, thin tongue and flies through the night, searching for victims. And the way she gets her victims, if you have your window open with her long-ass, thin tongue, she uses it to suck out and eat your internal organs. Whether that could be through your ear, your nose, your mouth.
Your window is open right now.
Close that shit.
Make sure that shit is closed, bro. ASAP.
The only reason why I'm bringing this up is because I saw a video of a woman who's pregnant. She lives in the Philippines, and she starts hearing noises around her house. From what it looks like, the screams kind of look like pigs squealing, but
She has no pigs.
There's no pigs around.
Sa baka kayo eh. Tayo na eh. Na, ngayaro na.
The woman you just saw in that video leading the class, 26-year-old Reagan Gray, turned out to be a pedophile. Just last month, Reagan was arrested for having an inappropriate relationship with one of the 15-year-olds that she was in charge of at her church. At the time of the abuse, Reagan was teaching at the Little Rock Christian Academy and volunteered for her church Emmanuel Baptist student ministry. So basically, Reagan tried her hardest to work around as many children as possible. Who knows what kind of horrific thoughts were running through her mind at all times when she was around these kids. Reagan, before her arrest, was a woman of God, someone who devoted her life to living a pure, holy life. But in 2020, the parents of a student allegedly found text messages between his teacher and himself. Keep in mind, he was a minor. They confronted Reagan about it. She said she would cut off all communication with the kid, and she insisted that it had never been physical. However, in a counseling session in 2023, Gray herself admitted that the relationship had been physical and sexual. And after she ratted on herself, an arrest affidavit was secured, and she was eventually arrested. Now, the teenage victim would actually state that Reagan would send him naughty photographs every single day while they were communicating. They also said that they kept their activity to only stuff using the mouth because she said that she and the student needed to stay pure, which is just disgusting. But this church has had a lot of scandals this year. The same church in March of this year revealed that the children's former assistant children's program director, a man named Patrick Stephen Miller, had had an inappropriate relationship with 2 young girls, and he had assaulted them while they were inside of the church. Hopefully the legal system hands this woman a punishment that goes along with the severity of this crime. But in America, you really never know. She'll probably get 2 years and be out on the street again to victimize more young children. And if you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife, Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms like Apple Podcasts.
In 27 minutes of entering a hotel room, 24-year-old Colton Wright was shot and killed by his ex-boyfriend. Colton had been dating 25-year-old Brennan Wakey for a few months, but the relationship was pretty toxic, so much so that Colton had actually broken up with him. Brennan was known to be pretty controlling, and he didn't handle the breakup well. He had reportedly become obsessed with Colton and even threatened him. Fast forward to December 9th, 2021. Authorities were called to the Hyatt Place Hotel in Sarasota, Florida after a housekeeper discovered a dead body in one of the hotel rooms. Upon investigating, the body was confirmed to be Colton's, and he had been fatally shot in the face. After combing through the security footage, Colton was seen entering the hotel at around 2:30 in the morning that same day with Brennan and an unknown man. Roughly 27 minutes later, at around 3 a.m., Brennan was seen on the hotel's security footage, quickly exiting the hotel with a gun in his waistband. Brennan was arrested a few hours later and has since been charged with murder, but despite that, and despite the fact that Brennan was showcasing disturbing behavior before the murder, he has since been released and is walking free with GPS monitoring until the trial. Many believe that the reason he was released, even though he allegedly murdered someone, was because of his status in the community. He was a young graduate from NYU that went straight into Wall Street. He and his family are very well off, and they know a lot of people with a lot of power. I try really hard to never give my personal opinions in videos like this, but the fact that Colton will never get to see his family again, all while Brennan is out and updating his LinkedIn profile, absolutely disgusts me. Right now, the trial is set for November 6th, but it has been pushed back a few times before, so I'll keep you guys updated.
Case will absolutely make your blood boil, so I'm really sorry to do this to you guys right before Christmas. It was the 7th of May 2017 and Brooke Skylar Richardson was 18. She was a popular cheerleader from Ohio and lived in Carlisle with her mum Kim and her dad Scott and her little brother. Now, although her first name was Brooke, she was known to all of her friends and family as Skylar, so I'll call her Skylar for the purposes of this video. Skylar actually struggled growing up with her body image and she was diagnosed with BD aged 12. However, she did grow in confidence as she got older, and in the year in question, she'd been dating a guy called Brandon. Now, he seemed really nice and the relationship was a good relationship by all accounts. On the 26th of April, Skylar had gone to a gynecologist appointment and was given some startling news. She was told she was pregnant. She wasn't just early on, she was in her 3rd trimester. So it wasn't even like she was really early and she could kind of make a decision either way. When you're in your 3rd trimester, you're literally about to give birth. Now, Skylar seemingly ended up keeping this information to herself. She ended up just kind of carrying on her life as normal, hiding this huge secret from family and friends. Just days later, it was her senior prom. She attended though like nothing was up, and she just carried on as normal. 2 days after attending though, she was about to give birth. It happened while she was at home and her parents were asleep. She took herself off to the bathroom and just literally gave birth on her own with no medical intervention. She said she sat on the toilet and kind of just felt that something needed to come out. She then named the baby Annabelle before carrying the baby into the back garden and burying it. After this, she yet again just carried on as normal. And so did, obviously, her parents, with no idea that their grandchild was buried in their backyard. That was until Skylar went to another gynecologist appointment, and the doctor kind of said, "Oh, you've had your baby then, obviously, congratulations, where is it?" She then admitted to having given birth. However, she stated that the baby was stillborn and then she'd buried it. Now, this was then reported to the police, who showed up to Skylar's family home days later on the 14th of July. Now, I cannot imagine her parents' reaction when they heard about this, like, police turning up to the house and them thinking, why are they here? And they tell you that actually there might be a deceased baby in your garden. Now, Skylar actually continued on with the story about the stillborn until the baby's body was exhumed from the ground and the remains seemed burnt. She admitted that she had tried to cremate the baby with a lighter herself. She then also admitted that the baby was alive when it was born, allegedly. She was charged with murder and would plead not guilty at her trial. Now, there was obviously two sides. The defense tried to argue that police had pressured her into a confession, and the prosecution was arguing that she had confessed and she had therefore killed this child. Then a bombshell was dropped. It was alleged that after the first gynae appointment, the doctor had accidentally sent the positive pregnancy results to her mum. Skylar and her mum, though, claim that Skylar had convinced her mum that it was just a clerical error and she wasn't actually pregnant. However, there was more bombshell information when texts were revealed between Skylar and her mum. Now, although this doesn't prove anything, a text was read out at trial from Skylar to her mum that said, "I'm literally so excited for dinner to wear something cute. Yay, my belly is back now. I am taking this opportunity to make it amazing." This was just 24 hours after the baby had died. So, I mean, we could give the mum the benefit of the doubt here. It might not necessarily mean that she did know about what had gone on, but what do you think? At her trial, Skylar was ultimately found not guilty of murder, but was found guilty of abuse of a corpse, and she was given 3 years probation.
Hammer coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
This is what would happen if you ate dry ice, and it wouldn't be good at all. Okay, so you very well could have eaten dry ice before, in a cocktail or ice cream, but that's in extremely small doses. The real thing is negative 109 degrees Fahrenheit, which means as soon as you eat it, you will feel a cooling sensation all around your mouth. Your tongue and mouth will be frozen in a matter of seconds, which wouldn't be fun. And your teeth will feel extremely awful. Just imagine biting into the coldest ice cream bar imaginable. And if you kept it in there longer, you will eventually get frostbite. But if you swallow the dry ice, that's where the real problems begin. It will then land in your stomach, and if you eat enough of it, you will have a very, very sharp pain. And the craziest thing is, you will actually get frostbite on your stomach lining. And the more and more you eat, it will start to turn into gas, which would result in you burping up freezing gas. And eventually, after some time, your stomach will explode. So whatever you do, never eat dry ice unless you want your mouth looking like this and your stomach exploding.
So this week it came out that Kristen Chenoweth was almost a victim of the Girl Scout murders. This is going to be part of a new series called Close Encounters about people who narrowly escaped a horrible fate, so follow along for more. Some quick backstory is in 1977, 3 girls were found murdered on their first night at Girl Scout camp in Oklahoma. They were all staying in a tent together, and their bodies were found on the trail leading to the camp showers. Now, in 1977, there was no way to test for DNA evidence, but a local man, Gene Leroy Hart, had actually escaped prison and was on the run. He was arrested for the murders, but was acquitted by a jury. There was actually a note found on the campgrounds 2 months earlier that said, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in Tent 1, but that note was discarded by the camp director, thinking it was a prank. Now, Broadway actress Kristen Chenoweth was actually supposed to be on that trip. She fell ill that weekend and was unable to go, but she says that it's haunted her entire life. So it wasn't until this year, 45 years after the murders took place, that we might finally have enough DNA evidence to convict Jean Leroy Hart. He passed away in 1979, but this might at least give some closure to the families. Hulu just released a documentary called Keeper of the Ashes about this entire event. Let me know if you're going to watch this weekend.
Conducted inhumane medical experiments without limits in the concentration camps of Auschwitz. I am Josef Mengele, a German doctor and SS officer in 1943. I was supposed to be responsible for selecting detainees upon their arrival. I was so cruel that no selection took place. I sent them all to the gas chamber. During this time, I carried out increasingly bizarre experiments, particularly on twins due to my obsession with human genetics. I subjected prisoners to organ extractions, injections of toxic substances, unnecessary surgeries, and other medical tortures, all without anesthesia, only for my personal medical experimentation. I even attempted to alter the genetics of patients to fit the criteria of my SS officer ideologies. I also performed numerous involuntary sterilizations using methods that caused suffering to prisoners due to the infections they provoked. The human experiments I conducted at Auschwitz represent one of the darkest chapters in the history of medicine. Despite this, I was never convicted for these acts because I fled to South America for many years. I died of a heart attack in 1979 in Brazil, never having been judged for my crimes.
This is what would happen if you were the only person on Earth. Up first, if you're the only person on Earth, you can do and go anywhere you virtually want. Which would be awesome, but you should be way more concerned about your survival. You have to be extremely careful where you want to seek shelter, because cities would be extremely dangerous. And without proper maintenance, they will start to fall apart pretty quickly, and you can even run into dangerous insects and animals. Next, if you wanted to go to the country, even that isn't safe. 400 nuclear power plants will begin to fail and explode, causing hundreds of nuclear explosions, which wouldn't be good at all. Now, when it comes to food, supermarkets are the place to go. They have enough canned foods there to last you decades. But if eating natural is more your style, you might have to hunt like they did back in the old days. Finally, for water, you will have thousands of liters to go through. This is from all the bottles of water at different stores and places. But eventually, you will have to learn how to purify your own water, which really isn't hard at all. So all in all, if you play your cards right, you can easily survive being the only person on Earth.
TikToker faked having cancer in order to trick people out of money via a fundraising page. A TikToker from Iowa called Madison Russo was arrested in January this year after faking having pancreatic cancer. She did this in October 2022 when she was a university student. She claimed on social media that she had been diagnosed with the life-threatening condition. Initially, people believed her, but then medical professionals came forward to cast doubt over her claims. They stated that there were medical discrepancies in her story. Police then actually got involved and looked at her medical records, which confirmed that she had never been diagnosed with cancer. She was charged with theft by means of deception for using the fake illness to raise nearly $38,000 from kind donors online. She had set up a GoFundMe in order to obtain money and has now been ordered to pay restitution. She was recently given a 10-year suspended sentence, and the judge ordered her to pay the restitution and over $1,000 fine. She will also have to complete 100 hours of community service. The judge stated that she had taken part in a criminal scheme and that serious crimes must have serious consequences. The judge stated that she had deceived friends, family, her community, other cancer victims, charities, and strangers.
These are scary videos you should never watch at night. Okay, so the video I'm about to show you shows a kid who was home alone one night when something or somebody started knocking on his door saying it was his mother. But the thing is, his mom wasn't even home because she was working the night shift. And the way it's knocking and sounding make it sound so demonic. Let me know what you think this is because it's absolutely disturbing.
Jean? Jean? I simulated my own abduction to obtain $30,000 from the Kidnapped Victims Fund. My name is Sherry Papini. I am a mother of 2 children, and on November 2nd, 2016, I was reported missing by my husband, Keith Papini. I had gone for a morning jog and did not return. Authorities quickly initiated a search to find me. About 3 weeks later, on November 24th, 2016, I was found near a highway in Woodland, California, approximately 240 kilometers from where I had disappeared. I was injured and bound with chains. The precise details of what happened during my disappearance remained unclear and gave rise to much speculation. I told investigators that I had been abducted by 2 masked Hispanic women who allegedly beat and mistreated me during my captivity. I claimed to have been released by my captors and left on the side of the road. Authorities conducted a thorough investigation into the case, but obviously found nothing. I received over $30,000 from the Kidnapped Victims Fund and, according to some sources, possibly an additional $127,567 from Social Security. Subsequently, authorities uncovered the deception, leading to my conviction and imprisonment in a federal institution in 2022.
Have you heard of the singer who narrowly escaped Ted Bundy? This is part of a series called Close Encounters, people who just barely escaped a terrible fate, so follow along for more. So Debbie Harry is the iconic singer from the band Blondie, and one night in 1970, before she was even famous, she was out late at night walking by herself in Manhattan. And that's when she was approached by an attractive man in a white Volkswagen Beetle. Sound familiar? She said she got a bad feeling from the man and said no, but he was pretty persistent. And she had been walking a while and her feet were hurting and she was tired, so eventually she kind of just gave in and got in the car. She quickly realized that something was not right with this car. The backseat had no window cranks and no handles, like there was no way for her to get out of the car. She starts panicking, but she has the wherewithal to reach her arm out of the open window and open the car door from the outside. But the man driving sees her do this, so he speeds up and takes a really sharp corner, throwing her out of the car onto the street. Years later, during the Ted Bundy trial, Debbie Harry was watching TV and immediately recognized him. Some people are skeptical and say that Ted Bundy might have been in Florida when Debbie reported seeing him, but all of these years, Debbie has remained steadfast in the fact that it was definitely him that picked her up, and all of the details she has noted about the car have been spot on. Bundy went on to confess to the murder of 30 women, but a lot of people think that number is a lot higher. So thank God she got out of that car.
This is the unsolved murder of Anton Jermaine Hyman. Anton was described by his mother Vanessa as a happy boy, well liked by the girls and a proper Jack the Lad. He liked basketball, music, his moped, and was also into plaiting and cutting hair. He was also a doting big brother to his little sister. On March 20th, 2004, Anton said bye to his mum and left the house. He was seen by witnesses buying a Mother's Day card and then getting into a taxi outside KFC by himself. Anton's body was discovered by a passerby around 11 a.m. on March 21st, 2004. He was lying face down in the River Brent. He'd been stabbed, shot and beaten. Forensic examinations showed that he'd been shot with a homemade .22 caliber bullet and stabbed with a 4.5-inch knife. A call to Anton's phone had also been answered after the time that police believe he died, but they've been unable to trace whoever answered that call. Anton's family over the years have put out multiple appeals for information and even offered £20,000 as a reward for any information that leads to the killer being found. Anton's mother believes there's a fear factor around his death and anyone coming forward. She said that his death was brutal and nobody would want to hold their hands up to doing that or to even knowing about it. Police believe he was killed the evening of the 20th of March 2004. He was captured on CCTV around 8 p.m. between Greenford Avenue and Brent Valley Park in Hanwell. It's now 9 years on from this murder and somebody out there must know something. There's been multiple arrests since Anton's death, but everyone's been released without charge, and the police are no closer to finding out what happened to Anton.
These are scary games to play in real life, part 2. This game is called Concentrate, and it's an extremely disturbing game that tells the players how they're going to die. To start the game, the person playing sits down on the ground with their eyes closed, and someone then sits behind them. Then the person behind will start lightly tapping on the player's back, while saying, "Concentrate, concentrate, people are dying, children are crying, concentrate, concentrate." Now tap on their head and say you just got hit with a hammer. Then poke both sides of their body and say you just got stabbed. Now grab their neck and swing them back and forth and say you just got hung. Finally, whisper in their ear saying you're standing on the edge of a building. You're feeling dizzy and suddenly somebody pushes you. Now tell the person to open their eyes and ask them what color did they see when their eyes were closed. And whatever color they saw will reveal how they will die. Red means you're going to get stabbed, blue means you are going to drown, yellow means you would die by poison, orange means you would die by fire, green means you would die from a great height, purple is suffocation, brown is buried alive, gray is dying from a disease in the hospital, white means you would die from old age and go to heaven, and black means you would die of old age and go to hell.
One of Leonardo DiCaprio and Tobey Maguire's first agents was a pedophile. This is an extremely disturbing story. So I can't find any real photos online of this guy. I don't know if he's wiped it off the face of the internet, but his name was Robert David Villard, or Bob Villard. He was an acting coach for young and aspiring actors, and he represented a number of the clients that he coached as well. So in 2004, a 17-year-old boy reported to the police that Bob had molested him when he was only 13. Bob pled no contest to the charges, validated the kid's story, and basically tried to put the whole thing behind him, but the internet would never let this story die. That is because he was one of Leonardo DiCaprio's first talent agents, and he took a number of pictures of him, including this picture right here, and even this picture. Now apparently he represented him for a good while because these are all photos that Bob took of Leo DiCaprio. And since Bob was an agent that represented a bunch of different children, only God knows how many kids he managed to victimize, or how many kids he victimized that stayed silent. So I'm looking at newspapers.com right now. Now this is interesting. This is something that I never found. I should say this is something that I never found talked about in any of these articles, but I think this is the same guy, Robert David Villard. He's right here in a newspaper in 1987. So this was over 15 years before he was charged with actually touching a child. He was caught in a CP sting. I'm finding this out right now for the first time on newspapers.com. Check this out. This is an actual old article. So this is a whole old article from 1987. Look who else is here. Robert David Villard, 40, an agent for child actors. That has to be the same guy. So he was charged with receiving or interstate transportation of CP. That is crazy. So yeah, I guess that just proves once a pedophile, always a pedophile.
This man very nearly got away with murder until he decided to strike again. It was the 15th of July 2010 and Norma Lopez was just a normal 17-year-old girl. She was a hard-working girl who loved dancing and fashion. She was attending summer school at Valley View High in California. On the day in question, she left her final class of the day and went to meet friends. She usually walked from school with her boyfriend, but on this occasion she was alone. She was on her way to her friend's house near the school. When she never turned up though, her friends were concerned. They decided to see if they could meet her on the way and they walked her route across a field towards the school. It was there that they made a worrying discovery. Norma's bag, a school binder and a broken earring were lying on the floor. Norma though was nowhere to be seen. They called police and a search began, but no luck. 5 days later, it was announced that there was a $35,000 reward for information leading to Norma's return. Tragically, this didn't help and just a few hours later Norma's body was discovered. She was found deceased just over 2 miles away from where she had vanished. She was found with no clothes on from the waist up and her death was determined a homicide, but her cause of death was not determined. The hunt was on to find her killer, but it would actually take a year before a breakthrough. In the meantime, police tested DNA that they found on Norma's earring and it had no matches. That was until September 2011 when a match came through following a man being arrested on an unrelated charge. This was 42-year-old Jesse Perez Torres. They also found that his DNA was all over Norma's clothes too. He was arrested for the kidnap and murder of Norma. At his trial, it was revealed that he had randomly encountered the girl on her solo walk. He had been reportedly angry about his wife leaving him during that time. An anonymous woman also testified that he had attacked her too, dragging her into his car at knife point and R-ing her. He was found guilty and was given the death penalty.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look in there. Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. At least that's what a lot of people think. Today we're going to take a look at some of the evidence that may refute the official story. And you can decide for yourself what you think about this whole thing, but let me tell you, some of this stuff is pretty crazy. If you want me to do a whole series about Jeffrey Epstein, his life and his crimes, let me know in the comments section below, but today we're talking about his death. On July 6, 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was arrested when he was leaving his private jet. And a little bit over a month later, he was found dead in his jail cell. When Epstein was arrested, this was absolutely national news. Everybody was talking about it. It was such a crazy story because he had so many powerful connections. He had been really good friends with the President of the United States at the time, tech moguls, and loads of other celebrities and politicians from across the planet. So everybody in prison knew that this guy needed to be guarded, right? I mean, he was literally the most high-profile prisoner in America. So this is where the story starts to get a little strange. So according to various prison psychologists that had talked to Jeffrey Epstein while he was in prison, he said that he didn't want to take his own life. Many times he expressed to these people that he didn't like pain, he was a coward, it was against his religion, and that he would literally never do that to himself. And I know that it is possible that he was manipulating people into thinking that he wouldn't do it just so that he could do it, but it is interesting that he was talking about this all the time. So the mistakes surrounding Epstein's arrest and eventual death started right away. On a prison intake form, he was listed as a black inmate, obviously he was white. And it also stated that he had no prior sex offense convictions, even though he was a registered sex offender. Like I said, this is the most high-profile inmate in America, so why would they make these mistakes? There were also multiple phone calls placed by Jeffrey Epstein that were not logged and not recorded by the prison system. They have no real record of who he called or who he talked to, and that is obviously a blatant violation of any prison's policy. For the entire month that he was held in prison, all the psychologists agreed that he may have seemed a little down, but he didn't seem like he was about to take his own life. On the night that Epstein took his own life, he made a social phone call. This phone call was not recorded, it was not logged, like I said, as prison policy states that it should be. And later on, the unit manager asked who Epstein had called, and he said his own mother, which didn't make sense because Epstein's mom died in 2004. In reality, that phone call was placed to his girlfriend at the time, Karina, who was a dentist from New York. There are 3 people that have knowledge of this phone call. None of them have stated that Epstein gave any indication that he was about to take his life. And it's interesting because the New York Times asked the Bureau of Prisons for Epstein's phone logs from prison, and they released them, but that phone call was not on the logs. After this, Epstein was escorted back into his cell at 7:49 p.m. by a guard named Tova Noel. And it was at this point in the night when the story takes a turn, and all of the controversy really begins. I'm going to cover all the stuff that surrounds his actual death in the next part of this TikTok series, so follow me if you want to hear the stuff from his jail cell that's inconsistent with the official story.
This is the story of Stephanie Hamill. Stephanie, a 20-year-old travel agent from Wakefield, West Yorkshire, had her whole life ahead of her. She was engaged to the love of her life, James Garland, and was looking forward to a really bright future. Steph and James had met at school when they were just 13 and 15, proper childhood sweethearts. By the ages of 18 and 20, they'd moved into their first place together in Wakefield, and 6 months later, James asked Steph to marry him. By summer 2003, Steph had started shopping for a wedding dress with her mum Jane. The big white wedding was all she could talk about. She was so excited to marry the love of her life. Unfortunately, the couple never got to set a date for their wedding. On November 29, 2003, the couple had enjoyed a night out together in Wakefield city centre. As the pubs and bars of Westgate were closing, and after grabbing a takeaway, the couple were going to walk home, but instead decided to try and flag down a taxi. Stephanie had been walking slightly ahead of James as the pavement was narrow, and they soon saw headlights coming towards them. Stephanie stuck out her arm, and a black Mercedes pulled up just ahead of her. As it had stopped, Stephanie assumed the car was a taxi and started to climb into the back seat. Just as James was approaching the car, the driver put his foot on the accelerator and sped right past James. Stephanie's leg was still hanging out of the back door, and James could hear her desperately screaming his name. The driver of the car was 29-year-old Ioannis Revenikiotis. He'd previously sexually assaulted a pregnant woman, and just an hour before picking up Stephanie, he'd also tried to lure 2 other girls into his taxi. When they told him to get lost, he'd carried on driving, looking for his next victim. James managed to flag down a police van, and between his distraught sobs, he managed to tell them that Steph had been taken. They drove James home to see if Steph had turned up there, but as they pulled up to the house and saw it was still in darkness, a voice came over the radio and told them that someone had been found in the road just 2 miles away. Stephanie had been found on the outskirts of Wakefield, lying in the middle of the road. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Stephanie had feared for her life as Reverend Otis drove her towards the countryside. She'd managed to get the door open, falling from the car, and being hit by an oncoming vehicle. That vehicle didn't stop and dragged Stephanie down the road before fleeing the scene. It was 2 years of living in absolute limbo for Stephanie's family before Reverend Otis was tracked down. His car was found in a scrapyard in Greece and he was arrested. It was another 2 years before he was charged, but in 2007 the jury found him guilty of Stephanie's kidnap and manslaughter and he was sentenced to 11 years. The driver of the car that hit Stephanie and failed to stop was Mohammed Ashik. He was given a 200-hour community punishment order and banned from driving for 18 months. At the trial of Reverend Otis and as the verdict was read, Stephanie's family could be seen punching the air in the gallery. They said nothing could bring Stephanie back, but they took some small comfort in knowing he'd been jailed.
Did this mum save her children from a horrific attack, or was she a cold-blooded killer? It was the evening of the 13th of December 2001. Tracy Roberts was at home with her 3 children in Iowa. She would later tell police of the horrors of that evening. She said 2 men broke into her house while she was bathing her 1-year-old daughter. At this point, her husband was apparently out of town. She told police that she ran to her son Bert's room and gave him the baby before being pulled back. She said one of the intruders choked her until she became unconscious. Now, Bert apparently stayed in the bedroom guarding his 2 younger siblings and arming himself with a baseball bat. A short time later, when Tracy realised she had regained consciousness, she ran to her bedroom and apparently grabbed a weapon from a safe. She then fired her weapon at one of the men, causing him to collapse onto the bathroom floor. The other intruder apparently escaped. Now, Tracy's 11-year-old son, Bert Pittman, backed up his mum's story, but there were doubts. Investigators found Tracy's neighbour, 20-year-old Dustin Wade, dead in the home and began to analyse the scene. Interestingly, he'd been shot 9 times with 2 different guns. Tracy explained this by stating that her and her children were trying to get out of the house after she had shot the man, and they saw the person on the floor move, so she shot him again. She said in the frenzy and the panic, she'd grabbed a different weapon to do so. She then said when she found out the intruder was Dustin, she was devastated. She knew Dustin's family, and her husband Michael actually had apparently grown quite close with him. Police started looking into finding intruder number 2, who had seemingly got away, but with no luck. They then started to wonder if he even existed. Interestingly, nothing of value had been stolen from the house. The only thing that was found was an old computer, which had carefully been placed into Dustin's car, which was on the drive. A paramedic also stated that the marks found on Tracy's neck did not match with strangulation and seemed to be self-inflicted. Tracy's ex-husband John was looked into as the pair were in the middle of a custody battle. To police, she painted a picture of an abusive ex who she alleged SA'd her son Bert. He denied this and claimed that Tracy was the one who was abusive to him and that she'd even threatened him once with a gun. Then investigators turned their attention to Tracy's husband Michael. As I said, he'd had a close relationship with Dustin, but apparently had been physically abusive to Bert. He allegedly even broke his nose once during an argument. Michael denied this, but he did have a history of violence. He was arrested in December 2000 after an argument with Tracy. Tracy accused him of pushing her to the floor and making her hit her head. Michael claimed that Tracy once got him drunk and tried to suffocate him with a bag. Following all the accusations and counter-accusations, the pair divorced. The case went cold and Tracy moved to Nebraska with her children. Now, Dustin's mum remained incredibly frustrated about her son's death. To her, it didn't make any sense. Dustin considered Tracy a friend, and he also hadn't armed himself with any type of weapon going into the house. He'd also just kind of casually parked his car on the front drive. His mum's concern grew when she found out that he actually had been shot into the back of the head 4 times. This indicated that the shooting was not self-defense. The case was reopened in 2008 and there were more troubling revelations. The house hadn't been particularly dishevelled and there were inconsistencies in Tracy's story. Many who knew her described her as manipulative and aggressive. Then there was the discovery of a notebook in Dustin's car. Dustin had seemingly written a strange tale about being contacted by John, who was Tracy's ex-husband. In the notebook it said that John wanted Dustin to kill Tracy. However, there was something strange about this tale in the notebook. It gave very specific details about John that Dustin would never have known on his own. Investigators started to wonder whether Tracy had fed Dustin this information to write in the notebook on the night he was killed. They noticed that the language that was used in the notebook was almost identical to the language Tracy used to describe John. She was arrested and charged with Dustin's murder. It later came out that Tracy had asked Dustin to come to the house on his own sometimes to do paperwork for her. Police believed that maybe Tracy was just trying to use Dustin in order to frame her ex-husband and therefore win the custody battle. Tracy was eventually sentenced to life in prison. This case made me terrified to go to the cinema. This is the case of the horror in Screen 9. James Holmes was raised in California. His mum was a nurse and his dad was a scientist. From a young age, he was experiencing night terrors and allegedly actually tried to take his own life when he was just 11 years old. He was apparently obsessed with guns and weapons and had dreamed of becoming a mass murderer. Between May and July 2012, he legally bought 4 guns. Background checks were conducted and he was allowed the weapons. He also bought spike strips, which, if you don't know, pop the tyres of cars if they chase after you. On July the 19th, just hours before tragedy would unfold, James mailed his notebook to his psychiatrist. Inside the notebook, James detailed his plans to kill. The notebook was actually discovered later on undelivered. Just prior to entering a cinema in Aurora, James rang a crisis line to tell them about his plans to kill. However, the call was disconnected after just 9 seconds. At the midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises, CCTV captures James walking into the cinema. He walks into Screen 9, props open the door, and then walks back out again. Shockingly, he goes to his car and gets guns out and gas canisters. He re-entered the screen at about 12:38 PM and set off 2 gas canisters. When he entered Screen 9 again, he immediately opens fire on the audience, instantly killing 10 people. 2 others later died in hospital from their injuries. An additional 70 people were injured. This was an absolutely packed out cinema. James also shot at people as they scrambled to exit the screen. His youngest victim was a 6-year-old girl. Witnesses said this all unfolded as there was actually a gunfight on the screen, and initially they all thought it was special effects and just part of the film. Police were actually on the scene very quickly after the first 911 call. James surrendered to the police and was arrested in the car park. He was apparently very calm when he was arrested and told police that he had booby-trapped his apartment. When police investigated his apartment, this was found out to be true. He was sentenced to 12 consecutive life sentences.